welcome to Be the Game, the Business of Sports. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor at Black Enterprise, and we have an amazing show for you today. We have an amazing guest. He was an amazing athlete. He was an amazing representative of other players in the sport, and now he is an executive with the NFL. Please welcome to the show, Troy Vincent Sr., NFL Executive Vice President of Football Operations. Welcome to the show, Troy.
Thanks for having me.
Man, I was a fan of yours when you played, so I already get that out of the way right now. And I was someone, let me just set it up this way. When it starts out, it's a game. Then it becomes a pastime because then we begin to enjoy watching other people play. At some point, if you're fortunate, it becomes a profession, then it becomes a business, and then you become an industry leader as you are with the NFL. But talk about that journey. I know you were born in Trenton, New Jersey. I was born up the shore in Long Branch, New Jersey. Talk about that journey from when you first, I guess, started playing the game. Yeah, the love of the game and that journey to where you are now.
Like most young boys in the community, I played every sport. A little bit of basketball was my favorite pastime. I spent most of my time on the basketball court, ran a little track, and then I did play some football in the backyard. Didn't have much grass in Trenton. So
Long Branch too, trust me.
It was, cars and streets, but we did play what we call two-hand touch, and had an opportunity to play in high school. My mom was back and forth between Jersey and Pennsylvania, and we had moved over to a place called Lower Bucks County that was right across the bridge from Trenton. And the family that I was staying with, it was one rule: you have to participate in every sport year round. You don't come home from school when school ends. And it was just like, my godparents, James and Linda Bodley, but I don't play football. I don't play organized football. And he was like, well, you're going to play this year. And I said I was going to wait the basketball season. And frankly, my junior year in high school, the head football Coach Jim Dundella, had came to the gym, and Mr. Sharp, who was my gym teacher, introduced us and said, hey, I think you should come out. I think you have an opportunity to make the team and contribute to what they believed at the time would be a pretty good football team. But he used the words, I think you have an opportunity to come out and contribute. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in the fall. And came out, hadn't played much organized football at that level, and earned a scholarship. Went on to play ball at the University of Wisconsin, and it was history since then.
I love those stories. Again, I'm a true NFL junkie. I hate to use that word, but I like the inside of the NFL. Remember back in the day, we didn't have series like Hard Knocks to give you an inside look at that. But I kind of want to go back a little bit over that journey. Like you said, lots of boys and lots of communities start out, whether it's organized Pee-wee or in the street like that I played like you did, have this aspiration. I was one of those kids. But then along that spectrum, there's the day. Sometimes it happens in high school, sometimes it happens earlier, sometimes it happens in college, and sometimes it's NFL training camp or the combine when you realize you're not going any further. So one of my best friends from high school is the late Sam Mills, who is now a Hall of Fame player. And he was one of the people we played in the streets, but he was an obvious talent from day one at every level. And I tell the story that the first time I ever really got hit hard on a football field was in fifth grade. He hit me. And the last time I got hit was I was trying out for football in high school. I was a punt returner wide receiver, clearly undersized, you could tell. I was fast, and I remember getting hit by Sam Mills, laying on the turf on the football field at Long Branch High School and making some career decisions about whether that
Sam was a real deal.
He could hit. In fact, his nickname for us was Clean. That's not what his nickname was in the NFL, but we called him Clean because he hit you so hard you thought it was a dirty hit.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Sam was an inspiration to so many, and he played with a great New Orleans defense. He played with Swilling and that group down there.
Some say the best linebacker core of all time.
Yes.
So, but again, I want to bring it back to you. At what point in your journey did you, as you went from step to step, how did you feel Did you think early on that being a pro player was a possibility, or was that something that became a realization through, as you started in high school and
So growing
college?
up in Jersey, which is interesting, so you're in Trenton, and you're either a Sixers fan
Oh yeah,
or you're a Knicks fan
right.
because you're right next to Philly, and you're right up the highway from New York. And frankly, I grew up, man. I was a Dr. J, Andrew Toney, Bobby Jones, Moses Malone. I grew up in the era. You're a Philadelphia fan. We're the best in the land. That era. So I always thought that I would be potentially that dream, that aspiration of playing for the Philadelphia 76ers. The transition occurred, and I think we all come to this road in our lives where it was my godfather, Bud James Bodley Sr. at the time. He literally sat me down in between my junior and senior year and said, "You got a chance to play big time college ball. You're 6 foot." At the time, I was 6 foot. I was 155 pounds, scoring 21, 24 points a game. He said, "Do you know how many kids in the country that can do that? There's thousands and thousands. But there are not very many people that's 6'1" that can move like you move on the football field." And he literally at dinner, and Bud, both Linda and James, both were Prairie View A&M graduates. So I should always get a lot of stories. And he just said, "I think if you commit to this sport, if you give this sport its all, it'll have some returns for you." And Bud was a Johnson and Johnson executive, and Linda was a mobile executive, both from out of Prairie View A&M. And it was at that time he was like, you need to focus in on this one sport because it could pay dividends later on. And that's literally where the pivot was.
And that's a perfect, because that also I can tell was the transition to it becoming a profession, at least a professional goal. Meaning, like you said, you got to focus. This is where your opportunity lies. Talk about that transition, because, like I said, a lot of people on that journey from game to pastime to professional, they get to maybe being invited to a combine, or they even get
Right. So
drafted, but they may not go further than that. But go ahead.
if I can just add,
Right.
it was never the goal of becoming a professional. It was always using athletics as a way to excel education, accelerate those efforts in getting someone else to pay for your education so that you can come back home and work. So that was it was they never, and I'm so thankful for that. It was never about you becoming a pro football player. It was, we're going to use sport as a vehicle to go get a good quality education so that you can come back home and be a productive citizen at home. And I studied urban and regional planning at Wisconsin because the thought was, how do I come back home with a good education and turn my city around? That was always the thought. But every year in school, and I was just learning the sport, so I was fortunate I didn't go to college with bad habits. So I was literally learning how to play a position at 18, 19. So it wasn't a lot of bad habits. So I was learning the game while playing. It was never about pro, but come home for spring break, come home for the summer, you're sitting there folding clothes, you're watching the draft. And then you say, you know what, if I had an opportunity, I think I could do this. And every year was just a progression. But it was never in my ear, you're going to become a pro. It was, we need to get a good education, come on back home and go to work.
So let's talk about you transitioning, successful career at Wisconsin, obviously, and you become a pro football player. Talk about what that was like for you. You made it to the league, ended up 5-time All-Pro, Walter Payton Man of the Year, Where's a White, now Alan Page Man of the Year. talk about your experience as a professional player, not only in terms of what happens on the field, obviously, but your continued development as a professional.
When it's sometimes when I think about that journey, because it has been a journey and continues to be a journey. Um, I never had unrealistic expectations. Even going through the process of the draft, and at the time in '92 here in New York, they only invited 5 players, and you're in a ballroom. So just seeing it was 5 of us, and someone says, "Hey, you're going to be a lottery pick." I those things were like that was new language to the family, and it was just if I had an opportunity to try out, I knew there weren't going to be 10 people to beat. They weren't hungry enough. So we kind of kept it in perspective. If I had a chance to get a tryout, we knew there weren't going to be 10 people in the defensive back room that was going to outwork me. I was willing to play multiple positions. I was a kickoff returner, punt returner. That was always the mindset. I happened to be drafted. Get drafted here. I could think it was Radio City Music Hall at the Marriott, one of the Marriott hotels. Literally, I was the only player in my draft that didn't have an agent. So I was criticized at the time. And going back to that business, we thought about that through the process was, wait a minute, this system is a lottery system. And if I just look back at the year prior, I'm going to make a percentage higher than what the guy was picked at my same position. I'm going to get a little bit less than the folks that were in front of me. Why should I pay someone 5, 6, or 10% of that when it's already, the system is already in
Kind of baked in.
Yeah, baked in. Yeah. And I was criticized for being this lottery pick and not having representation. And I remember the night of the draft, I get a call from the Rams. And at the time they were doing pre-draft deals. And the number 1 pick was Quentin Coriat. They had the Indianapolis Colts. So I get a call from the Rams, who has the 3rd pick. And they offer me the 3rd pick. Friday night, whatever night it was, before the draft. And I said, okay, 3rd pick, what are the terms? And the terms was a year longer than the first 2 guys. So I said, I can't do that because in my mind, I'm thinking, if I sign this contract, I'm going to hurt everybody else behind me. Number 2 pick got a 4-year deal. You come to me with a 5. But that was the carrot that was being tossed. I'm a young boy. I'm at the draft with my grandparents and my mom in my hotel room, and I'm having to make these decisions on the fly. But it wasn't about being the 3rd pick or the 4th pick or the 10th pick. It was, if you give me a shot, I know I'm going to make it because I know 10 guys. That was in the back of my mind. And I end up telling the Rams, no, thank you. And they said, well, we're going to, and at the time, a guy named Bob a D tackle from out of Pitt, they chose him. And I was end up being drafted the 7th pick. But it was always business first. And making sure that I don't make a decision that's going to hurt everybody else, because that's a selfish decision. When every other pick after me would have to be either negotiating around my terms or with my terms.
That mindset and having that mindset that early in your burgeoning professional career as an athlete, it makes sense. Not just saying it, given your career journey, but it's almost like your mindset was already set for what you later did during your professional career as an athlete, with the NFL Players Association, becoming your 4-year stint as president of the NFLPA, and the things that you did. I mean, first of all, tell me about that 4-year experience. And you really, not only, you were already thinking about other people, but now you're not representing just yourself and your own interests. You're representing all of the athletes.
So I was a rep 13 of my 15 years. I was president for 4. I was vice president for almost 8.
Wow.
So I was part of the executive committee
Yeah.
For quite some time. Again, I was raised by 2 laborers from Trenton, New Jersey, my grandmother and my grandfather. I was doing my contract in the car. I get drafted. I'm in the car, and a guy named Eddie Jones, who was the president of the Dolphins at the time, had called and say, here's where we are numbers-wise. I didn't have an agent. And my grandmother heard me say, no, I can't take that deal. And when I hung up the phone, she reminded me, She says, me and your granddad for the last 36 years, uh, we made $1.35 an hour. And you go, damn. But I know she was hearing me say no to millions of dollars, but she kind of put it in context. And it was like, it was a tone that I said no that bothered her. Like, one, you weren't raised that way. Secondly, we were able to take care of you, 5 other kids, and other grandkids off of $1.35 an hour. We paid our taxes, and that mindset of, just being grateful, appreciative. She said, I need you to call that man back and tell him that you're going to come and play. I waited till I got home, made the call back. But those were it was always about trying to make good decisions, solid decisions. But my folks that I had around me, my godparents, my grandparents, that's Southern wisdom. Both grandfather had a 6th grade education, World War II veteran. They were laborers, but they had some fabric about them. You earn what you keep. Never walk past anybody that's down, and as my grandpa would say, down on his luck. You feed people that are hungry and never leave anybody behind. That was the mindset.
Wow. Wow.
And I took that into the labor. That was part of the labor journey of you're serving the people. You don't get paid. You serve the people. You make sure that the workers, in this case are the athletes, they're informed about hours, wages, and working conditions. It's not a game. This is a business, and you got to remind the players. It used to be a game where you're in the parks and rec and college scholarships. Today, buddy, we got grown men in this locker room, and it's a business on the other side. And this is about protecting your hours, your wages, and your working conditions. And that was just the mindset. You show up every day, making sure everybody was informed about, whether it was salary cap, whether it was media deals, IP, you making sure that everybody on everybody's stool, and then you would have to take time if someone didn't understand what was going on or the economics of the business. I think that's the role of the rep, is to educate, and you're constantly educating and reminding him about there's power in unity. We must align on certain things. We're not always going to agree with management, but there's things that we can agree on, keeping the game first and foremost.
And I love what you say about this idea of understanding the business as a professional in the business, right? And one of the most impressive things that you did during your time as an executive with the NFLPA, which I got to see with my own eyes, was the NFL Business Management and Entrepreneurial Program. And I also, during that period, you were bringing in like financial educators to the rookies. And I know that because I was one of them. I had the AFC East. They knew that to put me in charge of the NFC East, because then I would have had to be nice to Cowboys. but as a Giants fan, that wasn't necessarily what I was trying to do. But I saw with my own eyes the efforts, and I had a conversation with Antonio Freeman. I said right before he go on the air, and he's very, very passionate about being at the rookie camp. And he said, I made a lot of the mistakes these young guys made in the first part of my career. And he says, and I still love the game, but the truth is the second part of my career is about recovering from the things that I didn't know. And so he was like, so I'm very, very passionate about this rookies, teaching these rookies as they come in, because people don't necessarily recognize these are still 18, 19, 21. I didn't have my balance, my first checkbook till I was 26, So just talk about, again, you're building on something you've already set up about educating young athletes, young people about this profession, this business, so that they can do what's best for them and do what's best for this.
It all starts with, and I share this now, you can't lead them if you don't love them. And when you're dealing with young men that are 20, 21, 22, they don't know what they don't know. And there's a lot of, I would say, not mistakes, but they just haven't been exposed to a lot of things. Coming in, I treated every day as though I was going to make, as I would say, I'm going to make today count, but I treated it as though it was going to be my last day. So there was no taking off of a day. You know, practice was like game. And that preparation transition was always part of the consciousness. Even though I might have been financially, by the way the structure of the locker room was in Miami, you had Dan Marino on one side, it was myself and Brian Cox and Marco Coleman on the other side. I was one of the last people that you were going to cut, but that wasn't my mindset. It was about transition all the time. And when I hear today, even today, when I hear athletes or someone says, no, you need to wait and before you start thinking about entrepreneurship or thinking about life after ball, that's a mistake. Those are parallel paths because transition can occur at any time. So the teaching of being not just financial literacy, it has changed now. Now these athletes are, you talk about the business of football. Well, that's in high school now with NIL. Different game. You know, I was dealing with meal tickets, 20, 10 cent, $5 meal tickets. These young men have millions of dollars when they enter into the National Football League. So the conversation has to change. And we need to be teaching them about how do you expand on it? How do you create not only generational wealth, but how do you create wealth? How do you pass that on? Many are in that place. So transition, the entrepreneurship program. Ken Shropshire was my second year in Philly. I just came over to Philly and just thinking about the athlete transitioning in and the athlete transitioning out. And the fundamental question, why don't we have the success that we should be having in transition? Because we're not prepared. We're living in this athletic bubble that they've kept us in. From high school to college. Nope, don't do this. No. Every year, if the club, the PA, or the league office offered an internship, job shadow, a program, you got to be involved. You got to take advantage of those things. Why? I need to build my toolkit because the classmate that I was on college campus, he or she's doing internships. I'm in the weight room. They're out doing job shadows. They're sitting in boardrooms. I'm on the field running. So I don't have that luxury. And then once the game's over, all I know is what the locker room taught me. I call that the athletic bubble. And it don't get you very far. So developing with my colleagues programs that will allow the athlete to get a glimpse into whether it's financial literacy, whether it's marketing, whether it's entrepreneurship. And we built those programs from Northwestern, UPenn, Harvard, Michigan, and they've expanded on those today. So that's always been the mindset is transition, being prepared for transition.
You know, a while back, I've been with Black Enterprise a long time, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Drew Pearson when he was on our Beat 100 CEOs. He had a major company, and he talked about, and of course, he's one of the ones that navigated it successfully, obviously, but he talked about that bubble. He's like, you come out, and he's like, I could get the meeting because I'm Drew Pearson of the Dallas Cowboys, and everybody wants me to sign the football, but then I'm trying to talk business, and either I'm not as prepared as I thought I was, or they're not willing to look at me in those eyes because they never see me in that light. So you're talking about that transition thing. I mean, obviously we know that it's working because you do see a generation, a generation of athletes. I mean, NIL money is helping. That is at least thinking about because they've had role models in a variety of the sports.
And we have to be so excited for these young athletes.
Yes.
Where today NIL, people were doing it illegally for decades, and frankly, the athletes got the short end of the stick. So I'm so excited, not just for the high schoolers, but the collegiate athletes to be able to own their own name, image, and likeness and to be compensated for it. But this is where we have an opportunity as a community, the generation of athletes, we can really make a difference. We can really make a difference on how we see ourselves, how we see our communities, and frankly, how we become better business partners in the sport.
Yes, yes, and that's a perfect transition. So talk about where you're seated now. Talk about your transition into becoming an NFL executive. We could do a whole show just on all the things that you're responsible for. We're talking about a business that's on its way to Commissioner Roger Goodell's goal of a $25 billion business. Talk about what you do now as the executive VP of football operations, what you were doing. I know you had a position even leading into that role. Talk about what it means to be an NFL executive, and now you're at industry level. This is global industry strategy work.
So I'm very thankful and grateful for my experience as an athlete. And I had some really good training as a labor leader. Transitioning over to corporate America, just a uniform change. That's all. It was just a uniform change. And that uniform change, but the same thing still applied: preparation, dedication, commitment. Seeing my journey now, 16 years here in the seat, I'm able to actually see in how the industry has grown. When I was doing labor deals during my era, it was like DGR, they call that defined gross revenue, DGR, and now it's total revenue. So that thing has just accelerated. You referenced Commissioner talking about that 25 billion. Now I'm on the cost side of the house. So let me explain what the cost side of the house is. Everything in my unit is cost, is part of the cost of the operation of operating the game. So I can lean in with my colleagues on developing assets that are sold or that they can leverage. But my core responsibility is upholding the integrity of the game, is managing the game rules, officiating, transition of the athlete from college to pro. That's where the lion's share, and then the growth of the game now with flag. We want to be an international we're not there yet today. So we see, the expansion of international games year in and year out. That's not enough to sustain us on the global stage. When you go out of the country, we're like the fifth or sixth and sometimes maybe the eighth sport. What flag football allows us to do today, because it's affordable, it's accessible, and it's all inclusive, it allows us to go in different countries and you have a version of your game that's not equipment heavy, that doesn't require a ton of this infrastructure to play on. So building out that capacity along with my colleagues here internally. But the vast majority of my time is game integrity. Making sure that the 32 are all playing by the same rules. Because the appetite to win at this level is so great. The competition is through the roof. We are obviously, we're the greatest sport and entertainment property here in the States. But Commissioner's goal, and he pushes each of us, I call us cabinet members. I'm one cabinet member of many. You got head of finance, head of legal. I'm head of football. To grow the game, maintain the game, and making sure that what you all watch or what the viewers are watching is done in excellence. The operation is done in excellence with our media partners. How we show up, how we look, making sure the fields are prepared, making sure the players have what they need, the coaches have what they need. So that's all part of, that's inside of my vertical. I love doing it. Going from being an active participant to now being an active contributor. It's only through the grace
It's
of
an
God.
incredible number of moving parts. I mean, we're just sitting here where we are. We're seeing there might be 10,000 moving parts just in this room. And you're talking about both protecting the quality and integrity of the product so that it is a viable for, like you said, we're in the cost center. I'm in the cost center in our business too. But there's the revenue side that has to be able to depend on a quality product from the cost side to finance the whole operation. What have you learned, and what would you say to a professional aspiring? Because the other beauty now, that wasn't true when I was a kid, was you don't need to necessarily have played pro sports
Absolutely.
to become a professional in any sport. So this is something that you could aspire to, whether you're 5'6" like me, and found out by experience that I wasn't exactly cut out to go to higher levels. But now you have generations of young people who can say, I could be an accountant in this sport. I could do anything that I love. There's a way to do this in this industry, and that wasn't always the case.
That's the goal. If we could share, and that's part of what we do, some of our initiatives are, how do we inform more students about the opportunities in the ecosystem of professional sports? And what do I mean by that? Most of us just see it in the lens of being a participant. I need to be LeBron. I need to be Kobe. I need to be Jalen Hurts or Barkley. They don't think about camera, broadcasting, journalism, data and analytics. That's what we have to put in front of them early on, because what they're studying in college, it applies here. There are almost 300 and something different occupations outside of the field of play. So we have to continue to keep introducing all of these different career paths so our young people can see, I don't have to be participating on the field. I can be an official. I can be a coach. I can be leading in data. I can be journalism. All of these different career paths.
So, as someone who has an art degree, many people, because I've been a journalist all my career, I'm always fascinated by the design opportunities, whether it's helmets, uniforms. Back in the day, you had a home uniform and a away uniform. Now,
I would say this, and now with culture
yes,
being so relevant, the young people anyone that can integrate culture, the influencers with the game, with like the arts, as you just mentioned, like all of these things have now, there's just been this intersection. Hey, I came in, Sunday Night Football was all Hank Williams, country western, Hank Williams. Now we seeing everything.
yes.
Halftime shows. It's like we've done a 180. But all of these are opportunities for young people. We just got to continue to share with them what are the possibilities.
So as we wrap our conversation, man, I could hold you hostage for another rest of the day, but we both got jobs we got to do. What would you say, both into your own professional focus as well as what you could see happening for the league, for the business of the NFL? Might we be talking about if things really achieve the potential that we think it could be once you and I are both retired, and we're just looking at it as what happened over the course of your contribution during the course of your career to this?
So I would say, if I was to look into the future, at the path that we're taking today, truly trying to become a global sports property. We're in the LA 28 Olympics. We're in talks and discussion with the IOC around Brisbane. American football truly could become a global sport through flag. And I mentioned this about 5 years ago. The future of football is flag. When you look at the participation, who's participating? Again, affordability, accessibility, it's all inclusive.
You make a great point, because we already know basketball is an early accessibility. You need a ball, and you don't even need a hoop. You get a milk crate, you can play basketball. We interviewed Max Siegel for this show, and he talked about, because obviously he's NASCAR, but USA Track and Field, that all you need is a room to run for kids to be like, we could hold an Olympics right on our block. And so that point about where do you create avenues of accessibility to grow not only participants, but a fan base?
No, participation, fandom, international growth, and then that fourth bucket, that's the commercialization. And when you look at today as we speak, 23 states have sanctioned girls varsity flag. You got over 140 that offer college at the college level. There's a pro league being a men and women's pro flag league that will be introduced in 2027. The LA 28 Olympics. So when we start thinking about where this thing, like, it takes the sport to a completely new level. And what's so it's not fascinating, but what's the beauty? Because now young women, young girls have the same opportunity that you and I had as boys. They can dream. And they got this arc of youth, high school, college, pro, Olympic, something that has never been offered before.
Wow. Wow. That's a great note to end our conversation on. Troy, thank you for being our guest on Be the Game, the Business of Sports.
Thanks for having me.